The saxophone is a cool instrument. It has always walked that narrow line where it's accepted in classical and more formal arrangements and compositions, but is also known for rad, jazzy, underground kind of stuff and badass rock and roll solos. Kind of like the kid in high school who hung out with the mega cool kids, but always took the time to say what's up to the nerdy crowd and was never really bugged for it. They were a leader without leading. They didn't need the spotlight to be the center of attention, and they were fine just chilling in the back, knowing that everyone thought they were rad, and they didn't have to prove it. The first saxophone was invented in the early 1840s by Adolph Sax. Yep, his last name was Sax. It's already awesome. He patented the saxophone into two groups of 7 instruments each on June 28, 1846. Side note, George Harrison was fined £6 on June 28th, 121 years later, for speeding. Most likely George was not playing the sax at the time, however. Anyways, where were we? Mr. Sax had made 14 different saxes, all of them covering different voices and octaves. His intention was to have a full sax orchestra. Each series of sax was ranked by pitch in alternating transpositions of E-flat and B-flat and C and F. Unfortunately, the total sax orchestra didn't really catch on, and we are left with only 4 different saxes mostly seen today. E-flat and B-flat are the dominant pitches, and the most common saxophones are the soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone. Lisa Simpson's sax she plays most often on the show is a baritone sax, although she did inherit Bleeding Gums Murphy's sax in an episode, which is an alto. The alto sax is great for beginners, especially young students, because of its small size. The tenor sax is the most popular, and usually the saxophone people picture when they think of a sax. The saxophone is actually a member of the woodwind family, even though most saxes are made out of brass. It's the reed vibrating that makes the sound, as opposed to the lips vibrating in the mouthpiece cup, like most brass instruments. A saxophone reed goes for about $5 a pop, and generally lasts for a few months before it's too gross to put in your mouth, or breaks, or splits or something. The world's smallest sax is called the Soprillo sax and was invented by a German manufacturer in 2002. It measures in at a whopping 12 inches and is a full octave above the soprano sax and only a few octaves below a dog whistle. The largest saxophone was custom made by Gel Stainer from Brazil and has a tube length of over 22 feet. It's handy if you ever need to play a rad sax solo to a constipated audience or communicate with nearby whales. You can fit almost 23 Soprillo saxes end-to-end in this giant contrabass sax. I had trouble finding a shot where they fit the whole sax into the frame. There are some pics of it, but it's hard to tell if it's the same one that was in the video. The world's most expensive sax was estimated at $60,000 and was made out of silica with gold plating and diamond doodads all over it. I'm not sure if it was ever actually played or if it could even be played. Yamaha, Selmer, and Jupiter are some of the brands available in most instrument stores. Jupiter are decent, affordable horns, but nothing to write home about, I'm told. Yamaha makes a student model that is a very decent bang for your buck. You could walk out of a music store with a sax, or perhaps order one online or something for a few $100. If you want to get a more serious sax, a Selmer horn can go all the way up to $14,000 for a Series 2 or 3 special order kind of deal. Charlie Parker was one of the greats and developed a new style of jazz called bebop in the 1940s. Not to be confused with the TMNT villain of the same name, it features fast tempo, advanced harmonies, and was super duper hard to play. Fortunately, Parker was a shredder on the alto sax and had no problem rocking out the new style and became an icon for the hipster subculture in the beat generation. Sonny Rollins hit the scene a few years later in the late 40s. He has been called the greatest living improviser, and many of his tunes have become jazz standards. He was sort of the inspiration for the Simpsons character Bleeding Gums Murphy, and was a pioneer in the hard bop style. When we're at it, John Coltrane is definitely a name you gotta toss out there. He also held credentials for the bop styles and the use of modes in the free jazz style. He remains one of the most influential sax dudes in music history and received a Pulitzer Prize in 2007. My personal affection for the sax, however, wasn't really for the classic players. It started around the same time I discovered my parents' copy of The Stranger by Billy Joel. The album is peppered in rad sax solos by Richie Cantana, who was a multi-instrumentalist and played with Joel since the 70s. Greg Ham's integral sax riff in Who Can It Be Now by Men at Work also showcased how awesome a sax can be now. Clarence Clemons, also known as the Big Man, ripped it up for years in the E Street Band. To play with Springsteen, you gotta be a firecracker, and Clemons was dynamite every show. He was also in a ton of movies and TV shows, including Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The 90s saw a resurgence of ska, which was third wave by that point, I think. Bands like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, the Slackers, the Pie Tasters, and the Voodoo Glow Skulls had sax to the max, in addition to a bunch of other rad sax cameos here and there in other rad bands. Whether it's Meatloaf riding in on a motorcycle to rip up a rad sax solo in the middle of a sporadic sing-along, or one of the greats showing us how it's done, the sax has been an integral part of music for over 100 years. It fills in the blank and provides support and sparkle to so many cool songs. I'll probably never learn to play one myself or anything, as I got my hands full with the guitar and trying to stomp and sing and whatnot. However, if you don't play anything yet and always wanted to, consider putting it on the list. Maybe one day you could be part of a whole sax orchestra or something.